series. And, and today we are going to be specifically talking about your students' health while they're abroad and the addition of our CISI student health insurance policy to our Verto programs. I do have my colleague Madeline with me to help manage the chat. So I would encourage you to please put in your questions. And as I'm able to, I will answer them. Madeline will also help me keep track so that we don't miss any. And we will have a dedicated time at the end of the webinar for answering your questions. I would encourage you to double check all of this information with your student, as they are also getting similar information through their portal and through their sessions with their student success coach. So let's get started. The topics for today's webinar: how is that Verto checklist going, that pre-departure list of things to do? Reviewing our Verto vaccination policy, which I understand is new, and I want to make sure there's a good understanding about that. Also, the meat of today's session: being healthy abroad begins now in pre-departure. And then lastly, that review of Cultural Insurance Services International, CISI, the insurance policy that we'll be using for international programs. So how is that Verto checklist? I want to just make sure that you're aware that your student portal has a whole list of things that they need to be accomplishing. Many of the items you see bulleted under the student portal heading are already due. So hopefully your student has completed those. There may also be some specific program forms that they need to attend to. Please discuss this with your student. And if you don't have their password, ask them to share that with you, just for transparency, not so that you can complete their forms for them, but so that they can keep up and you can help make sure they're keeping up. I want to emphasize those passport scans, which were due the 15th of this month, now past date for Spain, the 18th of this month for Italy, which is now past due, but not until July 31st for our other programs, Costa Rica, the UK, Fiji. Please double check with your student, and if you're still waiting on any passports to come back, let your student success coach know. I want to talk a little bit about packing for location. It's never too early to lay out those things that your student might want to take with them, whether that's personal items, clothing, bug spray. I encourage you to buy bug spray and take it with you to Costa Rica. It can be a little more expensive there. Packing for location, getting an idea of what those things look out, laying them all out, and then weeding through them. We all tend to overpack. And especially as your student may be undertaking their first international trip, their first trip completely independent of you, it's important to get a look at what they're taking and make some good decisions about what is really needed. Traveling with medications. We'll talk a little bit more about this later in the webinar as we discuss health concerns. Traveling with medications can be simple. If you keep them in the bottle labeled with your student's name, should never remove anything from the bottle and place it in a Ziploc bag. That will definitely get the attention of our customs agents. Make sure that the bottle is labeled with your student's name. It's nice if your student brings with them a letter from their physician stating what the medication is used for. There will not be a problem with bringing medication into a country if it is legally prescribed to your student in the bottle it was prescribed in. Even if the medication may not be prescribed in the country where your student is going, they will not be confiscated. Those medications are your student's private property. But when we are talking about medications, I need to emphasize these are medications that are prescribed by a medical doctor. Medical marijuana is not permitted in our countries where we are going, and your student cannot take medical marijuana with them, even if they do have a provider card here in their state of origin in the United States. Now let's talk a little bit about that Verto vaccination policy, which I know was new for many of you as you've been planning this semester for your student for a few months now. We believe this policy really best safeguards the health and safety of our students, our staff, and our faculty, and it minimizes Verto's impact on our host communities. While we are requiring it in our programs in Spain, Italy, Fiji, and Costa Rica, we are also strongly recommending it for Hawaii and London. We have no idea if at some point in the future the UK may change their vaccination requirement. One reason why we are requiring vaccinations in those locations, Spain, Italy, Fiji, and Costa Rica, is to help our students be exempt from any required arrival quarantine process. We already saw that recently with Italy. They have changed their entry process, and if a visitor arrives with a vaccination card, they do not need to quarantine after arrival. The ability to get away from that quarantine after arrival is really helpful. It enables the student to have that full immersion in the academic and cultural adjustment phase. They are not sitting in a apartment or waiting for that 7 to 10 days up to 14 days of quarantine. So please discuss with your student. And if there is a medical concern that your doctor can verify, we are more than willing to review that documentation and make an exception as we can in alignment with those countries' laws. We fully expect the COVID protocols for the fall 2021 term to continue, meaning that we will comply, with all of those local restrictions, whether that's a vaccination card required for entry, whether it's a quarantine required on entry, contact tracing in the event that anyone is exposed. Verto guidelines will also remain in place where they are needed, and that means a period of quarantine after any sort of contact, suspicion of illness, masks where needed, and of course, social distancing as much as we can continue to implement it. I know we're all waiting for this pandemic to end, and we're all watching closely as variants surge and resurge. But we will continue these conversations and do our best to answer your questions. Our third webinar in this series will deal almost explicitly with COVID protocols, entry and adjustment on site. So now let's talk a little bit about your students' wellness and accommodations they might need. Healthy habits start now. For many of your students since graduation, they have been running a gauntlet of friends and activities, summer jobs. It's important that they think about their health and well-being as they look forward to international travel. Jet lag is real, and it is impacted when you approach travel being unwell. Moderate their caffeine, get on a good sleep schedule. If your student uses alcohol, understanding that it can have a detrimental effect to their well-being, making sure they take their medications regularly. And if you help them remember their medications or actually set those medications out for them, talk to them about a schedule where they will be maintaining their health and they are responsible for taking their medications. Now, if your student has not used alcohol in your home, they are underage otherwise, I would encourage you to speak with them about what it will be like on location where they may be permitted to legally drink. And that is in our European destinations and the UK. Alcohol can have a very detrimental effect on their ability to attend class, on their wellness in general. And given they may not have experience with alcohol, it can set them up for some unpleasant things socially. I just want to make sure that you do take the time to think about and talk with your student about using alcohol on location and moderating their use if they choose to for the purpose of their health. If you do need to secure medication for your student for the duration of the program, Please speak with your student success coach, your student's student success coach, excuse me, and they can help you navigate not only the student portal, but contacting CISI in case a refill is needed. Generally, an insurance company in the United States with that enrollment letter that you've received as being admitted to a Verto program will enable you to refill a medication in advance of departure, meaning with that enrollment letter, you can qualify to get the medications your student will need for the 3 to 4 months while they're out of the country. And that's important because medications vary around the world, and we want to make sure that your student maintains their regimen and they're taking the medication that has been prescribed to them and formulated according to the US FDA. If there's any questions about medication or securing medication, please, again, have your student reach out to their student success coach, and you're welcome to also email me. Now, some pre-existing conditions may need lab work or a check-in while your student's abroad. And those services are available. CISI, as our student health policy, will provide those coverages for pre-existing conditions. And it's just a matter of going in through the student portal once they're registered, looking for a doctor and setting up those appointments. Our on-site staff can certainly help accommodate the student getting to those appointments that have been set up. And you might also include your family doctor in searching those resources on site to make sure you are connecting with the best physician for your student's continued care. Now, your students had the opportunity to report their allergies and their accommodation needs through their application process. And if for any reason they have not indicated an allergy or an accommodation that they have received through their high school years, an academic accommodation, um, any sort of assistance or adjustment that they've needed to help them be successful, please encourage your student to fully disclose those concerns to their student success coach. We want to make sure we don't forget anyone, have anyone fall through the cracks. Specifically around allergies, we like our on-site staff to be well aware of who might have a reaction to a bug bite or to a peanut, um, someone who's lactose intolerant, gluten intolerance. All of those things are very important for your students' health and well-being. So being as transparent and disclosing those upfront now is critical. Remind your student to do that. Now let's talk a little bit more about the CISI student health insurance, which Verto has recently added and made part of your programming in our international destinations. We have coverages through CISI for any minor injury or illness. Those coverages can be done through a reimbursement process with your student paying out of pocket to the service provider that they visit, or they can negotiate to have those services directly billed to CISI. For more serious injury or illness, let's say, God forbid, your student has appendicitis while they're abroad. It has happened. I've had that experience with students. CISI works with AXA, Emergency Travel Assist, to arrange a guarantee of payment so that when your student is admitted to the hospital, all those costs are covered up front. If there are any costs that are incurred, you pay out of pocket for an x-ray as part of that broken ankle or medication upon discharge. Those items can be reimbursed to you. Most important part about this process is to save the documents. Now, at this point, your student may not have had a lot of experience with health insurance or had anything ever happen to them. So speak to them about collecting documents, being honest and open with the staff should they need any illness, any treatment for any illness, if they're feeling unwell. As much as they will come back to you by phone, WhatsApp, message, and say, I really don't feel good, they need to share that with the on-site staff first so they can get them the treatment they need. Medication replacement, I mentioned, is available through CISI. Once in a while, a student will lose their medication or for some reason not been able to pick up their full amount needed before they departed. Using their student portal through CISI, they can find a medication equivalent and they can help get that prescription refilled for them on site. Again, I can't emphasize enough that my CISI student portal is so important. It's available 24/7 to your student. After they've registered, again, ask them to share their password and username with you so that you can check on resources as well. Most importantly, CISI and AXA Travel Assist have repatriation and evacuation coverages, which are a great relief for many families in case anything happens and the student needs to come home immediately. It does not cover pandemic evacuation. However, it does cover any illnesses or associated problems should they contract COVID-19. Now, at this point, I want to open it up for questions. We'll get a look at the chat. Because I apologize, I have not been monitoring it very closely. Madeline, is there anything that jumps out at you?
Yes, I've got your back on this. So there are three questions that I would love to hear your input on. One question in here that I wasn't able to answer is in regard to Tylenol, Motrin, over-the-counter medicine. This individual said that previously they were only available by prescription in Europe. Can the students take Tylenol, Motrin, or over-the-counter medicine with them, kept in a bottle?
They certainly can take those over-the-counter medications with them as long as they are in like a bottle labeled Tylenol. I can tell you that there are Tylenol equivalents in Europe. Panadol is the brand that I know is also available pretty widely. Many pharmacies in Europe also are able. You can walk in and a pharmacist can help prescribe or provide for you what would normally be a prescription in the United States. So many times our staff can direct the student to a pharmacy and say, hey, tell them what your symptoms are. You may not need to have a doctor's appointment. So that is an advantage. But yes, short answer, Tylenol, over-the-counter heartburn medications, things that your student might use, they are able to be taken abroad. You don't need to send a full first aid kit though. And trust that it'll be a great experience for your student to kind of navigate and disclose their symptoms with our staff.
Great. And the second question is in regards to their vaccination card. Do they need to carry their original vaccination card or can it be a photocopy? And what would you suggest around keeping copies of that card?
That is a great question. And I would like to broaden it to include all of the documentation that your student might be taking. We'll say this, try to say it in every webinar. Originals are what are required. So please, your students should bring their original vaccination card with them, but they should also carry a copy. In case anything does happen to that original, they at least have a copy. Same thing for their passport. They should carry their passport, but also a copy tucked away someplace else. Don't put the copy of the passport folded up in the back of the passport. That's not good. Copies of their airline tickets should be left with you. I know we don't usually get airline tickets hard copy, but make sure that the email where it confirms their flights is also shared with you. Copies of any important documentation, prescriptions, anything at all should be kept with you. And then your student should also carry those hard copies. I know it's very popular to take a picture and keep it on their phone, but phones get lost. Phones encounter pickpockets in Spain and Italy. So please encourage your student to have a separate copy in their email or a hard copy.
Great. We have a specific question that we may not know exactly the answer to, as it's a specific shot that the student receives. However, what would be your advice, Liz, for where they'd go for information about if someone receives shots due mid-semester, finding out if they would be able to receive that injection in their destination?
Absolutely. Working through their My CISI portal, where they will register, they'll have a complete resource list and they can find out where to get that shot. If there's a concern about any shots that might be needed in pre-departure, please visit the CDC website and look up per country where your student is heading to with Verto, as well as places they might be thinking about visiting. Some students who study with us in Costa Rica like to jump down and go to Panama. Panama has different vaccination requirements. So please speak to your student about any travel plans and look at those immunization requirements for across the region where they might be visiting after their program completes.
Deborah has asked us, how do we recommend that students carry documentation? Um, I presume for safety reasons, Deborah. She asks, in a travel pack, or do you have another recommendation?
Well, I do believe in the old school travel wallet, the kind that Rick Steves wears, something under your under your clothing, close to your body. I've seen some very innovative things on Pinterest and Etsy where people have styled them into scarves, into inside pockets on vests. So consider that. Do not put all of your travel documents in that carry-on bag or in that backpack. Make sure they are separate, along with a little bit of petty cash, separate on your student's person. Um, it sounds really old school and maybe a little paranoid, but it's true. It's the best way to travel, to be prepared and to think ahead, um, because it's the obvious bags that attract attention sometimes.
Just like Rick Steves, but khakis are optional. He always wears khakis.
Yeah, yeah. He does like the khakis and the backpack slung on one shoulder.
Yes,
That's not so cool. But
awesome.
he also, his son, has a fabulous travel series for students, the age of your students, for college age students, and it's much more relevant to the kind of travel and the concerns they face.
Very cool. Rob has asked us, he says, our state has an official vaccination record. Will that suffice for our student?
Yes, it would. However, if the location is requiring the COVID vaccine, then to make sure that vaccination is listed on that state immunization record. I know there has been some challenges from state to state with our federal system, also making sure the COVID vaccination is lock, uh, lodged onto that permanent state record. So both records would be necessary if they're not kept together, if the one vaccine is not listed with all the other MMRs, tetanus, et cetera.
Right. Piggybacking on our earlier documentation safety question, Deborah's asked us, do laptops get stolen? And I think we can expand that to other important documentation or items of value that the students may bring. What can students do to protect their items?
You know, this is a great question, Deborah, and I'm just going to digress a little bit because I will say one of the most challenging things to a student's health and wellness is when they have something lost or stolen. So, in pre departure, as they're making their plans to take their laptop, to take a new cell phone, they also need to think about how they will protect and secure that item, as well as any information that's on it, which is why I recommended not taking pictures of important documents and holding them only in the phone. So, any laptops and phones that you can insure on your homeowner's policy or provide additional protection so that your student can just go to the Apple store and get a new phone if their phone is lost or stolen, I highly recommend it. Make those preemptive, proactive plans so that an item can be replaced for any reason at all. Um, Dynamics vary around the world around theft and safety. It's always best to be uh, proactive and to think with safety in mind. Our students don't always think about that because they've gotten to dwell in this wonderful, secure bubble of your home, your city. Depending on where they have grown up, they're aware of crime, but they may not have had to navigate it themselves. However, they decide to go to that Starbucks, lovely Starbucks cafe in Sevilla. Sevilla has Starbucks. Starbucks is international. Um, they set up. They're going to spend the afternoon chatting away with some folks back home. They get up and go to pick up their beverage at the barista bar, and they turn around and their laptop's gone. There are certain places which attract thieves and crime because they know that they have an attraction to American students. And a Starbucks is one of those places. We should never, ever leave our personal items unattended. It's never safe to sling your backpack or your purse on the back of a chair. It needs to be hooked around your arm, hooked around your leg. These are just travel things that you may know as an adult, but also you may not, and your student won't know. So being proactive um, and thinking about personal security, as comfortable as they may feel in an environment, there are people who will recognize them as not local and take advantage of that unfamiliarity. So it's not a comment on the culture. Opportunistic crime happens in the United States too. Um, Guarantee you, if you leave that thing in the bottom of your cart at Costco and you may not have it later.
Yep, very true. A few more coming in here, Liz. So Lori has asked us, do we recommend that students bring an international vaccine book with them?
Any documentation that a student can bring which holds their vaccination records is great. If you're able to secure that little international booklet and have your doctor fill it out completely, um, that would be well received, especially if your student does have any complications around allergies or medications. If they do have pre-existing conditions, it's helpful to have that little health record with them.
So why not? Just
Why not?
bring what you got. Yeah, that's great.
It's a great step towards adulting, helping our students remember that not everybody knows them as well as their parents or their family members do.
Great. This is a question that isn't particularly health and safety, Liz, but I think between the two of us, we probably can answer some degree of it. It's about the international phone services. Are there any international phone services that you suggest for cell phones? This is a particular question about Fiji, but in general, what are our programmatic recommendations for students regarding their phones?
Well, I highly encourage your student to speak with their student success coach. Those young people have traveled and they have different demands in their cell phone use than I would normally. So I will say regarding Fiji, service is going to be tough. It's far. And even if you have international calling service, it's going to be a little spotty. So start with a conversation with your student about how often you want to connect with them. Is it going to be via phone? Is it going to be a computer video chat? Um, and just set up an expectation for communication. They can talk to their student success coach then about their recommendations, and then you can proceed with talking to your provider. You may end up changing cell providers for your students' time abroad. It's very common also to pick up a pay-as-you-go phone on site with a prepaid SIM card. And those are options that your on-site staff will be able to help your student navigate once they arrive.
Yep. I'll add to that, Grace, too. Like Liz said, the student life coordinator on site will be covering a lot of that with students when they arrive about what's best in their local area. And in particular, most students have chosen to go the SIM card route. But when they do have Wi-Fi and they do have internet access available, you can pretty much do anything with Wi-Fi, even if your student has Wi-Fi calling or FaceTime or something like that. And in the past as well, the students have known in advance, a couple of days in advance, if they're going into an area of Fiji or an area in their destination where they're not going to have service for a couple of days. That usually can be communicated in advance. Like Liz said, that's probably something good for you to let your student know that you're expecting from them as well.
That's great, Madeline. Thanks for adding that because it's true. We are used to a certain amount of connectivity here in the States. And if you are like me as a parent and you like to talk to your student as often as you can, although they don't always answer, maybe a text, maybe you want to establish what that connectivity is going to look like and understand it will be different.
Yes. Couple of quick ones here. Betty's asking us, for students in Europe, do we think it's probably okay for them to leave original documents in their flat rather than carry them on their person?
Yes, yes. Generally, we say put those passports and any sort of valuables, hidden underneath the socks. But do carry a copy of your passport with you. It just is very helpful since they won't have a driver's license or a local ID to help establish who they are and they're there to study.
Great. Teresa asks, where do we get an international vaccine booklet if she wanted to look into that?
I would encourage you to talk to your medical provider. I know there are some that you can download from the internet, but since you will want your doctor to complete that for you, to transfer all of those listed vaccinations with your pediatrician, speak to them.
Great. And I have a couple of things I'm going to answer here in the chat while we talk to it. But Susan asks about accommodations regarding health issues. Can parents contact the decision makers directly, or do they continue to go through the student success coach? So I think for this question in particular, this is probably the addition of Jen as well, Liz. In really what we're asking here is how involved are the parents in the accommodations needed for health issues?
Well, I would like you to do what you can to encourage your student to speak for themselves. It's very important as your student is moving from that bubble of their high school experience into this world of first year college, seeking some autonomy, that they also can talk about their accommodations needs, not be shy about that, not be embarrassed by that. And it's good practice for them to speak with their student success coordinator in talking about those accommodations. They should have already been reported with their health profile, and following up in person is very good. We do have a system here in place at Verto where we need to follow up on those accommodations. We have an expert, Dr. Jen Mitchell, who will navigate your documentation. It's important that you back those accommodations requests up with the documentation. Um, Whatever the independent education plan has been for your student, whatever their diagnoses or their needs might be around a distraction-free testing space or other supports, hard copy materials, along with things outside of the classroom. Um, those documents should all be submitted through their student success coach, and then we will work with the student and their family to make sure we can meet the needs as closely as possible as to what they have experienced in the United States. But again, I'd emphasize that this is a great time for your student to learn to speak for themselves. And then we're happy to collaborate with you to make sure that we get the best services in place so your student can be successful on site.
Wonderful. Wendy asks about visas. When are they necessary? Wendy, if your student is going to Italy or Spain, they are necessary, and your student has lots of communication in their inbox about that process. So if you are a US citizen, I should say, if you are an international student or going to somewhere elsewhere than Spain or Italy, yeah, please contact your student success coach, but you should not need a visa for your semester.
Thanks, Madeline. Great answer.
From Lori, there are passport health clinics. Oh, this is actually an answer for us, which is great. Thank you, Lori. There are passport health clinics that give you an international vaccine booklet also, and they will help you fill it out if you bring your vaccine history with you. So I forget who asked that question, but Lori has an additional helpful answer for us, so that's great.
That's great. I didn't know about that on-site resource, so that's really helpful.
And Kevin has asked us about when housing assignments will begin for the Spain semester.
That's a good one, Kevin. And I will let you know that we are still vetting housing. Of course, Spain is rebounding from the pandemic, and there are a lot of vendors and a lot of options for student housing. But we're in the final stages of vetting, so those accommodations should be made available to your student very soon. Keep up the conversation with them so they share with you immediately when they know where they are going to be living.
I think that's it. That's all the questions that we haven't been able to answer. Unless anybody wants to add anything last minute, I'll give a pause here. All right, Deborah's got something for us.
Oh, go, Deborah.
What do we recommend for sending money to students in Costa Rica?
Ah, that is a good one. I would really recommend that you have a shared account where your student can use a, um, a Visa, not a debit Visa, but a regular straight up Visa, something where you can um, move money onto that card and then they can access it as necessary. They should travel with a few, um, a little bit of the local currency with them. Um, but and when they're on site, local currency is generally what is used. They're not as card happy as we are here in the United States. But that straight up Visa card, not a debit card, that it needs to have a credit function. And talk to your bank. There may be a special one with no international transaction fees that you can open up for your student, a student card. It's a great step for your students' financial independence. Start their credit rating. Um, Although I'm very well aware that you'll be paying that bill. Um, One thing that I strongly encourage is that it's a joint account. We don't want to get into wire transfers or having to worry about those kind of issues where your student has to go and pick up cash at a Western Union.
Question for you, Liz, to recover a little bit of the CISI. It's the question is for CISI, do they work with health insurance in the states?
Your CISI, student health insurance, is an independent policy. Now, if for any reason they would not cover a treatment in full, let's say a pre-existing condition, there is a cap on pre-existing conditions, I think of $2,500. So if your student exceeds that cap, you could then use your own insurance, um, provided uh, provided let's say it's a Blue Cross Blue Shield and it's able to be used internationally. Okay, so that's something you might want to speak to your own healthcare provider about. But generally, I've never had a student exceed the cap. CISI was contracted because of their extraordinary service and their time in the industry providing health coverages for students studying abroad. Uh, and a lot of flexibility around whether it's a reimbursement or whether the provider will direct bill so that your student doesn't have to worry about collecting that documentation. Although I encourage them to always keep copies whenever they're doing these adult type transactions, providing copies for them for you at home.
Teresa asks us, is it possible or a good idea to send bug spray or other such necessities to the student address ahead of time?
It is preferable that your student bring them with them. Um, Customs can be a little challenging. Receiving packages, our staff are not able to do that until your student is on site. That's really important. When you think about the illicit trade that's happened over the years, it's more understandable that we don't just send packages to people who aren't right there right then. Um, so generally speaking, after your student arrives on site, you'll be able to send them packages to replenish maybe a bug spray that they really like and they can't find locally, or just that care package because you happen to have a birthday, they happen to have a birthday in the fall term. But I would encourage you to wait and not send any supplies until your student has arrived on site and they can receive them in person.
Great. We have a great question from Malin here. It says, do you recommend adding the CISI insurance for students who are going to Hawaii? So her student currently has Blue Cross, but should she also consider this policy?
We don't have a domestic coverage with CISI. CISI is only international coverage, Cultural Insurance Services International. Um, so I'm afraid you won't be able to do that. They have allowed us to extend their emergency evacuation and repatriation services to cover your student. So generally speaking, your insurance that you use every day in the States will cover them while they're in Hawaii, no problem.
That's great, though. That's good information of what we need to do there. Lisa has asked, what about visiting students and parent weeks for the fall term? What are we doing about that this year?
Well, that's a great question. And we've been in a lot of discussion because we are, of course, closely watching what those entry requirements are and how our host countries are opening up for general tourism. Um, I would encourage you to also watch on the State Department's website what your travel access might look like. The United States, in some places, is still listed as a red country. So you are welcome to visit your student. We have not yet at this time set up a on-site parents weekend. We're considering a virtual weekend, partly because of the just unknowns around regular tourist travel. Um, but we are very hopeful that by the end of the term, you might be able to travel on site and spend some time with your student as they've, built up their skills, their fluency in the local language. And I would encourage you to look forward to that time at the end of the term when you could visit your student and travel.
Yep. That is also a great choice because it, like you said, Liz, helps the students feel like they have something to share with you or sharing kind of their home with you. But be sure, depending on your location, Lisa, to also consider if that puts your student over the line of a visa stay or a stay as a tourist in that country, if depending on your location.
That's a good point, Madeline. Thanks for reminding us all about those visas.
Top of mind lately, definitely. All right, got one more question coming in. Grace asks what to expect in Fiji with regard to mailing packages. So I think maybe that applies as well to Hawaii and Costa Rica and some of our more isolated locations. What does that look like for mailing packages and the Fiji canceled flights? That I can help speak to that a little bit as well.
The one thing I'll say about mailing packages to Fiji is it will be expensive. So think about that and talk with your student about what they might absolutely need to have sent. And it will take a little bit of time because Fiji is far. So discuss with your student after they arrive things that they think they want, or if there's ways that you can have it ordered and sent to them.
And Grace, in regards to the question about if you have a Fiji Airways flight that's been canceled, we are aware of that several students have been in that position. So you'll seen a communication from us this week about this, but it's something that Liz's team and my team are looking at very carefully to make sure that students do have flights and to see what happens with Fiji Airways. So we'll be in touch about that. All right, I'm not seeing much. Oh, here we go. I just have to wait a second. As soon as I say I'm not seeing much, something pops up, right? Diana has asked us, her daughter's going to London. Given the variants there, how will Verto ensure the accommodation and class location is safe for students? Is it possible that class will be virtual at some point during the semester?
Well, I really wish I had a crystal ball to be able to answer that question because it is top of our minds. I think all of our students have had to navigate unprecedented hybrid classes. And that's the last thing they want as they're looking at starting their college courses is to now once again be sitting at a desk away from their peers and away from those really important social interactions. Um, we are watching the variants closely, and I can tell you that our partners who we work with in London are also concerned about that. Um, they have protocols in place, and in the event that contact tracing would be necessary or your student would have come in contact with them, someone who has confirmed COVID-19, they would need to quarantine at home and then would have the ability to do their classes online. We don't foresee, with the lack of the crystal ball, we do not foresee any hybrid classes being part of our regular academic program. However, the UK is also one of those places that is still discussing quite passionately about vaccine requirements. And they're doing that because of the cases and the variants that keep popping up there. So We can't make any promises that anyone won't get sick while they're abroad. But in the event of any illness, we do have this excellent health coverage, and we have excellent staff to ensure that your student gets the treatment recovery they need, and that they can bounce back and attend their classes in person as soon as possible. I hope that helps. I know it's a difficult thing. I really wish we knew exactly when this would be over.
All right. Anything further?
Well, as we're waiting for any last questions to come in, I would just really encourage you to speak with your student about their Verto student portal, about the things that they have left on their checklist, and about following up with their student success coach on anything around accommodations, allergies, anything at all that they might think they need on site. We want to get busy and make those arrangements, help them navigate the CISI portal for resources. Again, ask your student for their password and username. That's what parents do. Family members, we get in there and we help our students navigate those systems. And they learn a lot by speaking up for themselves through that process.
Last one that snuck in there, Teresa has asked, is drinking water provided at the student quarters and on student excursions? She's specifically asking for Costa Rica.
Water is widely available and widely provided on our campus and destination locations. It should not be a problem at all. If your student is in any way concerned, there are some fabulous personal water filters out there that attach to a water bottle. But yes, Costa Rica does have some of the purest water in the world. So.
I think we are just about there, Liz. I'm just adding some final things to the chat. If you'd like to see some additional resources, like Liz said, the portal is a great resource for your students. You can also check out additional information on the enrolled students page or speak directly to your student success coach. They are really here to be your student's guide through this process. And if they don't know the answer, they know who does. So they will help you through any questions that you may have.
Well, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for your support, Madeline. And I hope to see everyone or hear everyone's questions next month as we do our third and final installation of this town hall. Again, we'll be talking more about student resiliency, navigating post-arrival, homesickness, and how successful your student will be as they complete their Verto semester.
So thanks, Liz. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye now.